the Absurd Festival. We've had about 900 of you and your comrades attend over 12 days, so it's really exciting. Before we get started on our last lecture of the festival, there will be champagne and cake at the end of the police, so please stay around for that. That is courtesy of our sponsor, the Polish and Slavic Federal Credit Union. You are enjoying sandwiches by Potbelly, very healthy stuff. Do you introduce yourselves? They'll introduce themselves, but I do want to acknowledge a special guest, Consul General of the Czech Republic, Mr. Ukesele, and his wife Monica. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And without further ado,
all right.
There we go.
Hello, everyone. To call this a lecture is maybe a little bit ambitious, because what we would like to do is actually have a conversation. Yeah? We'll initiate that conversation by sharing some thoughts with you. But we'd also love to hear from you, your responses, your thoughts, just in the context of what we're talking about here, which is really power, oppression, and the themes that these three plays raised. Yeah. So we'll start it off with a few comments, and then we'll open it up, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your insights. Yeah. But first we should probably introduce ourselves. My name is Michael Brown. I directed the second and third piece, Mistake and Catastrophe, and then I was in, of course, the first piece, Muzzle, which was written by, I'm so happy to say, the gentleman to my right, yeah, who is... Would you like to introduce yourself, or shall I?
Please.
Oh, okay.
You're great.
Okay. I'll do my best. So Reza Shirmarz is Iranian by birth, and by way of Greece for 15 years. Now is resident here in the U.S., but only for the last year, a little less than a year. You've been in the U.S.
Yes.
Right? Yep. So we are delighted, and it was a sheer coincidence that he's not only in the U.S., but he's in southern Illinois, and so he got on a train this morning to come and see the show and be with us for this talk. So I'm so pleased to have him. And I'll talk a little bit more about his contribution to tonight when I talk about the three plays and how they came together. But yeah, anything more I should say? Yeah, a wife and a 15-year-old daughter in Greece. Yeah,
Yes, in Athens,
that's
yeah.
important in Athens. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, the most important part of my life. My family, of course, yeah. And
Please, yeah.
I really want to thank the theater managers, Zygmunt and his wife, amazing couple. I want to really thank the directors and the crew who brought this place to life. And I appreciate your presence as the participants in this performance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then, yeah.
Hello, I'm Sami. I directed the piece Muzzle. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, good. So I'm going to start us off with just a very brief history of these three plays, because I found it really interesting, and it is actually germane to the broader conversation about power and oppression. In 1982, Samuel Beckett wrote the first play, but which was the last play you saw tonight, Catastrophe. And he wrote that play and dedicated it in solidarity to a gentleman called Václav Havel, a Czech playwright and dissident. Havel had been imprisoned shortly before the writing of that play, after many years of political activism and working as a dissident in what was then Czechoslovakia. This is the early 80s, right? So the Czechoslovakia is, of course, a satellite of the Soviet Empire at that time. And Beckett wrote the play, dedicated it in solidarity to Havel. Havel was still in prison at the time. A couple of years later, Havel was out of prison, and he expressed his gratitude to Beckett and all the other playwrights who wrote work in solidarity with him, and then wrote a response to Beckett called Mistake, yeah, or The Mistake. It varies, yeah, depending on the translation. That's the middle piece you saw, set in the prison. Those were both published by an organization in the UK called the Index on Censorship, which has been working for, I think, 45 years or so to catalog and work against oppression and censorship in all places in the world and in all its forms. Then flash forward 40 years, 38 years to 2022, and an editor at the Index on Censorship responds to a writer who's offered an article to the Index on Censorship and says, we don't want you to write an article. In fact, we know about your plays and we know about your work as a theater maker. We would like you to write a response to Beckett and Havel's pieces. That's, of course, Reza Shirmarz. So Reza writes the piece, the first piece you saw, Muzzled, 38 years after Havel wrote his piece, which was 40 years after Beckett wrote his piece. Now, I say all that to say what's remarkable to me in working on these three pieces is that they all feel like they could have been written yesterday. And we can talk about why and what and all of the discomfort that implies, but I do find that amazing because, of course, that was a very different time in many ways, but life is cyclical, and apparently so are we as humans, and so things come around in various ways. Yep. So that's a little bit of the context, and please correct me on any of that if I've gotten it wrong. Yeah. But what I've asked Reza to do is talk for just a moment or two about the process of responding to someone like Beckett. I mean, that's a terrifying idea to me as a theater maker. If you know anything about theater, you know that Beckett is one of the gods of theater, and so it would be like being asked to follow a great performance. Give your response to this. Yeah. So I cannot imagine. But I'm also curious about what it was in those plays that you felt like you were responding to. What were the things that felt most important to lift up or to put in relief, or what? Yeah, what is that like?
Yeah. As you mentioned, I had written an article on censorship and like 14 different layers of censorship in Iran, which is going to be a book published in the future. I tried to develop it into a book. But Mark, the editor of Index, he told me, just forget about this article. Okay? If you're this playwright, we want you to write a play in response to Beckett and Havel. I was intimidated for a couple of days. I didn't know what to write. And finally, as I told you, I woke up 3 a.m, went to my office and decided to write something, even if it's something silly, and foolish. I decided to do it, and I improvised, and this play was born. I think it took like 4 or 5 weeks to write it and rewrite it and polish it into what you see today. Well, this is not. This is a short version of the full-length play I've written, which is like more than 80 minutes. I haven't published it yet. I haven't produced it yet for some reasons, And catastrophe and mistake are two plays on the phenomenon of oppression. And that's why, well, I come from a country in which you're born under, I was born under an oppressive regime, and censorship and suppression was a part of my daily life. And I believe censorship and oppression is not just about the printing industry or books or the media, etc. It's about our daily life. It's about our performance in daily life, as I mentioned before. I'm gonna give you like a short definition. I might ask you to give us your definition of oppression. What do you think? Well, I'm gonna give you my short definition, a very simple definition of oppression. I think oppression means when an individual or a body or whatever puts restrictions on another person, unnecessary restrictions on another person or a group of people or a nation or a culture or an organization. And I think there are three levels of oppression: individual or personal, cultural, and social or cultural, or sociocultural and structural. These are the three levels of oppression we see in these three plays. On a personal level, which is about our interpersonal relationships, oppression means putting restrictions on your family members. Maybe parents put limits on their children, among their siblings, a group of friends, at the school, education system, etc. At the cultural level, it's all about norms and values. When a dominant culture forces its norms and values, even if irrelevant, on to other cultures, and forces them to domesticate their norms and values and transform into a new culture which might not be accepted publicly in that particular culture or cultures. The third level, which is structural, and I see it in Beckett's play very much, in a very profound way, and also in Havel, in Václav Havel's play, Mistake, or The Mistake. The structural type of oppression refers to a systemic and structured and organized way of oppressing a person, an artist, a group of people, or a nation, or even a continent, as we see nowadays. You know better what's going on. So, also, it is good to mention, to know that, in communication sciences we have a principle called intersectionality concept. These three levels work together all the time. And that's why playwrights are very interested in these three levels of oppression. Imagine Aristophanes in the ancient Greece. or one of his plays is called The Clouds. It's about the systemic oppression. And that's why Arsafanis, or the main character of the play at the end, sets fire to the structure which imposes certain values and norms on the younger generations. Or the Greek tragedy writers, or the most, like more recent ones in the American drama, could be like Angels in America by Tony Kushner, which shows how queerness and how the queer identities are oppressed by the religious authorities, etc. Or Sarah Kane, one of my favorite playwrights, unfortunately passed away. Her play Blasted, which is on sexual oppression, but I believe it has these 3 layers of oppression in it. The interpersonal way of suppression, and the cultural imposition of norms and values, and at the end you see the big hole at the end wall showing that a great war is going on, and eating the baby, and the sexual abuse, etc. It's a shocking play. Yeah, I believe the entire history of drama is about playwrights trying to represent the phenomena of oppression in different ways, in different levels, and sometimes all the levels together in a single play.
Yeah, thank you. What I find, just to continue that thought, what I find amazing about all 3 of these plays is that we were talking about this before the show. It's almost we said philosophical or maybe scientific. These 3 playwrights are so honest. I feel like they're so honest about just looking at what we do to each other, how it is that we, in the various ways that you beautifully described, that we exert power over each other. And it's not all that we're about. It's not the only thing that's true about human beings and our relationships. But I feel like every one of the playwrights, in their various ways, is trying to look honestly as possible at what we do to each other. And that's what makes them so beautiful and disturbing, at the same time. And why I think they're all fascinating, in a fascinating conversation with each other. It's almost like I can hear these 3 great minds sitting in a room going, yeah, this, look at this. And another one saying, yeah, but also this, yeah, and this, and it's working on these. It's been fascinating just to feel like I was in that conversation as a child in the corner, just listening in a way, right? It's such a fascinating and disturbing conversation. So, Sami, I want to turn that question to you with that idea of these 3 playwrights trying to look honestly at power, at oppression, at collaboration, right, which is another element of this, complicity with power. That's also in all of these plays in various ways. What moved you, or what were you finding as you worked on this play that spoke to you on that level, or to your experience?
Yeah, I come from Syria, from Damascus. I've made my way out until I got to the U.S. And, 10 years here. So I grew up with many levels of oppression. And this is, since the 70s in Syria, it's been, now it's free. As of last year, they finally toppled the dictatorship after 54 years, right? But something interesting about oppression and suppression is it becomes a social performance too. It's not just even if you don't believe in it. When you live under those layers and you're born in them, you have to perform oppression yourself and onto others. Deep down, most people don't believe in it. But if you don't perform that, the consequences could mean death or being disappeared. Because nobody trusts each other. Anyone could be an informant, right? We have even jokes, right, in Syria about like, even your children can say the wrong thing and make you disappear. So your child can become an informant, intentionally or unintentionally, right? It goes both ways. Like unintentionally, your child says the wrong thing, right? And you know that could mean you disappear and your whole family disappears, right? So there's very serious consequences, and it's so hard to work together to get outside of that because you can't. How could you trust the other person, right? Right? That's a big thing, I think, right? And that's what's also happening a little bit in Muzzled, I think.
Yep.
Right? And you know, this director from abroad, he doesn't quite understand, but he's trying to do something because maybe he has a little bit more privilege and power to do something. But then at the end of the day, what happens? Everybody gets puppeteered and he can't do anything about it. So that's what happens.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
The only solution becomes escape.
If it's possible.
If it's possible,
Yeah.
because another thing, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing is like, there's something very absurd, right? So, Syria
Appropriately.
Right, appropriately. Since 1979, Syria's government, the dictatorship, the regime in Syria, has been categorized as a country that sponsors terrorism. Which, you know, also the Syrian dictatorship says it's fighting terrorism, and that's how it justifies the oppression it does. Obviously, like, you know, their affiliations with the Islamic regime in Iran, with, you know, with Russia, etc., right? With other dictatorships that are similar, right? But they market themselves as liberal. So like the marketing is like, if we go away, then the extremists are gonna take over and kill you all. So it was in their best interest to perform that to the world, but the world still considered them to sponsor terrorism themselves. And then it becomes a really difficult thing, even if you're someone who's born and raised there, how to get out of that when the rest of the world doesn't trust you as well. Right? Imagine a country like Pakistan or India, right? I'm not even talking about US and Europe, right? If you go with a Syrian passport or you need a visa, you're on the red list in those countries, in those other Muslim countries. Or other, it's not just like, oh, Americans doesn't want Muslim, etc. No, it's everywhere, right? That nationality is a threat, no matter who you are, right? So it becomes very hard to get out. Even like escape is almost just as hard, and it adds another layer of oppression that it's okay, not just the country, but there's repercussions that the globe is almost entirely oppressing you as well as an individual. Right? Because your escape route becomes so impossible. Right? So everywhere you look, it's impossible. Right?
Yeah.
So, there's a few provocative thoughts in addition to whatever provocations the plays might have offered. And as Reza said, we believe that, not just you as participants, but we believe that conversation is the most important thing, right? So we don't have all the answers. I don't know if we have any answers, right? We get a lot of questions. But I'd like to throw it open, right? Are there Are there thoughts that you have or questions about the plays? Did they provoke or inspire any particular things for you? And just in the spirit of a conversation, right? We may or may not have a response, but I do think these themes are so important perennially, but maybe even especially at the moment, that I think it's important that we have spaces to have conversations about them. So please, any thoughts, inspirations, questions? Yeah.
I'm just curious where you guys see censorship playing out right now, like some examples and
I work in the university. Enough said.
Me too.
Yeah, we work at the same. So we both work at Columbia College in Chicago. And not to wade into the not to wade into the specifics, but we are absolutely at a moment when we are changing the names of things, when we are being more careful about how we talk about things in our public pronouncements or advertising, whatever. And so, I mean, it feels very real. You see, I've seen people in meetings. I've felt people in meetings, that hesitation, that care that comes into a conversation when you don't want to say the wrong thing. Yep, absolutely. There's fear, and so yeah. I mean, I think that's one. I'm sure we have many examples even in the room, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's just stay with that for a second because I think it's so important. Yeah, are there other places that you all are experiencing censorship in various ways?
Yeah, I work in theater, and the Kennedy Center is one of our institutions that's really unique because it bridges the private and the public. We don't have like a lot of federally sponsored theater spaces in the United States, and I know personally with 2 playwrights that had residences that are canceled, and that is structural. It's censorship through removing funding. You can say, oh, you could do it, but when you go from a 3-year fellowship to nothing, you can't really do it. So I think that it's right now, and those are artists that are trans, and artists that are indigenous, and artists that are Arab, and writing about those experiences, and those experiences are being silenced.
Yes.
I also work at a university in Minnesota, and every single one of our research grants has been canceled. Just like at Harvard and Columbia and all the other big universities, we do a lot of research. And I can tell you that this means that unless we can turn things around in the next election cycle, 3+ years from now, we're going to be looking at decades of no advancement in science, no advancements in healthcare. And as you can see, it's happening on the national stage. There are also rollbacks in support programs for people who need healthcare and nutrition. There's an absolute attack on the intelligentsia, the intellectual community, and anyone who has been working in any forms of science and moving human knowledge.
If I may ask a question about muzzled, and I don't mean to be shifting the subject, but there seems to be within the play a sense of resistance going on to all of this.
That was in my mind.
And some of the characters seem to have faith that they can fight this out and they can do something. Now, what eventually happens is something else. And do they ultimately cower to the power, or do they actually keep going on? But it seems like that the Iranian artistic community has a very active and current sense of subversiveness, that you can fight this out, and this has been going on for 40 years. Yes. And many people in the outside world of Iran, they say, oh, those are not real artists. The real artists of Iran are outside. and those are the people who are just going along with the system, but yet there seems to be great work coming out of there, despite, and so the system has not completely succeeded in terms of, and great plays come out of there, great films, they win Oscars, they just last night, they won the Cannes Film Festival. Where are we in that conversation amongst Iranians and Iranian American creative communities? What does your play add to the discourse? I'm just wondering. I'm asking you a personal question.
Yeah, very good question. What you saw is a short version of Muzzle. It's I've written a full-length play which answers your question. What happens to those who resist against the oppressors, and do they disappear? Are there, they need to spend time? Are they, some of my friends, tortured? Or are there family members under pressure in different ways, financial, political, social, professional, whatever pressure? Yeah, creativity never gives up, in my experience. Maybe Muzzled is the less important play I've written. The most important plays I've written are in Persian language. I'm going to translate them into English at some point. And I know tens of playwrights, serious playwrights, who have written constantly after the Islamic Revolution. They never gave up, and they have created amazing dramatic texts. But unfortunately, oppression in Iran is not, as Sami mentioned, it's not just about the local authorities. It's not about the ideological religious authorities inside Iran. It comes also from the external forces. There are external forces other than the current regime in Iran, which do not want the real Iranian art be introduced to the world. I don't know why. I know why, but I don't know why. What's going on in their minds? They have destroyed the cultural bridges between the Middle East. I don't mean the East, because China, Japan, some of the southern, countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, those countries are doing a better job. But the Middle Easterns, they are ostracized completely from the mainstream global art and culture.
9/11. That's what I think.
Yes. There are different reasons. One of the systemic ways of oppressing other cultures is what we call monopolization of mainstream culture to the benefit of certain cultures, and that's it. Well, it's a matter of language as well. Those who don't write in English, they're cornered as well. And this lingua, the thing called lingua franca, has changed into some kind of issue. Well, I love English, I write in English, I enjoy it, but there are many better playwrights and poets and novelists in Iran. They don't know English. You know, what's going to happen to them? And there are not good translations into English as well. That's another issue. You know, the translators, for example, in the English-speaking world, they don't, I don't want to use the word care. You know, probably they are not aware of what's going on in the Middle East. You know, but you're right. They're like mind-boggling artists in Iran. I'm in touch with them every day. You know. And day by day, they're oppressed, they're censored, they're deprived of their rights as artists, but they find a different way to fight back and resist against the ongoing oppression.
I've just been given a signal. We have a few more minutes, but I think we do have time for one or two.
Yeah, just try to be real quick. Yes, sure. Probably from your experience, representing Iranian experience and Syrian, it kind of goes to totality of oppression, structures, etc. But even in this case, like I haven't seen the Panahi's film, which just won Pandora, right? But I've read some comments, and the mere fact that he was finally allowed to travel and present his film at Cannes raised a little bit of suspicion. So probably he was compromising inside the film, though it's about the, opposition people, but probably some ray of hope is that I read this comment just the other day. Everything is correct, of course, everything is justified in what you're saying, but there is a lot of, I guess, area which we are leaving behind, in between, a gray one, probably. Not a lot, but still, I'm presenting a different experience, also of sort of oppressions. Originally, a long time ago, but I'm from Russia and still keep some connections. And Havel shares probably some of my cultural experience with that in this sense. And say your play resembled somewhat in a very generalized way, of course. Sort of absurd is a generalized schematic thing. We know that, but I cannot help sort of thinking about all the grades in Russian stage and Soviet stage in 80s, 70s, and maybe into 90s as well. Maybe right now, sure, in a new sort of a cycle of this spiral history, what we used to call presentation for artistic council, ready to distribute work, to put it into run, or to censoring authorities, which is more or less the same, being invited.
Misha, a couple more minutes.
Right, which are being invited. And that goes to all the layers of compromises. And we're inventing a different language, a Ethiopian language. Otherwise, things will be just cut down and that is it. And no theater can exist unlike literature. So that experience tells me just to look more carefully into gray areas, what we're gaining or what we're losing, sort of an inner censor, or finally a way out in a different sort of a compromise, but rich language. It's compromised, it's poor, but it's rich in its own way. So that's what I wanted to say.
And another direction that's very similar that I find amazing, again, about all three of these playwrights, is the ability to speak poetically, to speak in the language of symbol, of metaphor, and to touch us, where we are with those, with what is still truth, right? but truth expressed.
Just one minor thing. I remember now I seen actually in Russia one play of Mrozek played in puppetry, in table puppetry. And that was so powerful. That added layers and layers and layers to this overgeneralized schematic. So that's what we're talking about.
We said it at the beginning, I'll say it one more time. This is, I mean, we can't do theater without an audience. Yep, that's obvious, yes. So thank you on that level, but also thank you for being here and for, even if you haven't shared anything, I think we can all feel the care of the listening and the care of attention, and that feels to me very important at this moment. I want to say thank you very much again to Reza for being here and for volunteering at the last minute to sit and have this conversation. By the way, I sort of surprised him with that. I'm very grateful for your generosity, and for Sami, for your for all of your artistry and for all of your contributions as well. And again, thank you all. Thank you also to the Chopin. This is and to Gwydion. Tommy's back there representing Gwydion. I just want to say thank you because I think this festival at this moment feels like it's more than just doing theater at this moment, and I think it's important, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
And I would like to add that if you're not scared or depressed after this, the police is coming in 5 minutes.
And it's very funny, I can tell you. It is. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you.